evening, everybody, and welcome back to the parenting course. Tonight, we're going to be looking at speaking words of life and death. My name is Mike, and this is Rachelle.
Hi, everyone. Together, we are raising three beautiful girls, aged 19, 17, and 10.
It's a great privilege, but it's an even greater responsibility raising our kids. Sticks and stones may break our bones, but words will never harm you, so they say. Now, as adults, we know that's not entirely true, but we use that on our kids as we try and protect them from the harsh words that they find in the playground and in the classroom. But truth be told, our words are actually like stones, and once thrown, or once spoken, as it were, they're out there and we can't get them back. And we can speak words of life, and that is like precious stones, stones that we possibly give to somebody. Or we can speak words of death, and that's more like jagged rocks, and those are the kind that we would normally throw at somebody. Words of life, people tend to treasure them and value them like precious stones, but words of death, we discard them, but not after they've damaged us and scarred us.
That reminds me of a story of some frogs that were hopping through the forest, and two of these frogs fell into a hole, and the other frogs gathered around the hole and saw how deep it was, and they said to the frogs, "You are never going to get out of there. You may as well just give up and die," And these frogs ignored them, and they just jumped and jumped. And the other frogs kept telling them, "Just give up. You're not going to make it. You're not going to get out of here." So the one frog took heed to what he was being told, and he gave up and he died. The other frog continued to jump, and the frogs yelled at him, "Stop hurting yourself. Just give up. Die." And he just continued to jump and jump until finally he got out of that hole. And the frog said to him, "Did you not hear us?" And the frog explained that he was deaf, and he actually thought they were encouraging him the entire time. And so the irony of that story is that the frog couldn't hear the words of discouragement, but the actions of the frogs gave him the determination to get out of the situation he was in.
Consider the first page of Scripture. It says that the earth was formless and empty, and the Spirit was hovering over the deep. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And then God said, "Let there be an expanse between the waters." And it was so. And it goes on to say, and God said, "Let there be dry ground." And each time it's God speaking it. As He speaks it, so creation happens, so it comes into being.
And that's the same with Moses. When he's led the people out of Egypt into the desert, and they're angry because there's no water or food. And he goes to God, and God says to him, "Speak to the rock, and the water will come." And so he does that. And then we also see it in Ezekiel, where he's standing in the valley of the dry bones, and God says to him, "Can they live?" And Ezekiel says to God, "Lord, only you will know that answer." And so he says, "Speak to them, say to them, dry bones, get up." And he says, "Prophesy over them." And that's what we need to do with our kids. We need to speak words of life over them, prophesy over them, and just encourage them.
It's an amazing thing, but those biblical references show us that once we say something, it's like God can act on it. God can do something with it once we've spoken it into being. And, my dad taught me this. He said to me, "Use your words." And we know that phrase, "love undeclared is dead." Well, that's entirely true, because if it's just sitting in our heart and we don't declare it, we don't speak it out, it is that, it's just dead. And so he said to me, don't be tight with your words. When you feel something on the inside, you need to speak it out. You need to communicate it. And as parents, we can we can look at our kids do something really well, and we can acknowledge that on the inside, but we don't speak it out. We need to say, well done, you did a great job there. You see your daughter handle a tricky situation well with her sister, and you think to yourself, oh, she did all right there. You don't leave it there. You say, well done. I'm so proud of the way that you handled that. And so we need to speak these things out. And so I'd like to look quickly at 3 things that we can give our kids with our words. We look at Matthew chapter 3 and verse 17. It's where Jesus has just been baptized, and he comes up out of the water, and there's this voice that comes from heaven. So the voice from heaven says, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." Now 3 things happen there. It says, "This is my son." That creates identity in Jesus as his Father speaks it. And then he says, "whom I love." And Jesus receives security from the words of his Father there. And then he says, "with whom I am well pleased." And that's the affirmation of the Father over his Son. So let's look at those 3 things quickly. So let's look at identity. Our kids must know, firstly, that they belong to God, and then secondly, that they belong to us. On this thing of belonging to God, we've got this picture stuck up on the wall just outside our bathroom door. And so each day as our kids walk out, they see this reminder on the wall. And I'm going to let them tell you what it says. Take a look at this.
Dear Gordon girls, each one of you are a daughter of the King. You are amazing and great. You're loved by him and your price has been paid. Live like the princess you were destined to be, in victory, abundance, and completely free.
Then secondly, they need to know that they belong to us, that they are Gordons. And so we have this phrase that we throw around in public, and they're called the Gordon girls. And so when we're at church and it's time to go, or wherever we might be, I'll say, "Gordon girls, let's go." And they will always turn around, they'll always find their sisters, and they'll always get together and they will leave. And it might sound a bit cheesy, but it's just reinforcing who they are. I don't call them by their individual names, I call them by their family name. And when we're sitting around the table sharing a meal and, just in the evenings, and I'll often joke with them and say, when you girls get married, just remember that you're keeping the Gordon name. Your husband needs to know that up front. And they're like, "Oh, come on, Dad, you can't do that." So I'll say, "Okay, at best, I'll settle maybe for a double barrel, so it can be Gordon Jones, but the Gordon's staying." Now, of course, I'm joking with them, but all the while just reinforcing actually who they are. Then secondly, security. God said to his Son, "whom I love," in that phrase, and that gave Jesus security. And we all use that phrase, I'm sure, quite often with our kids, with our wives. We express our love. But when I say to my kids, "why do I love you?" they'll always give me the same answer, and they say, "because I'm yours." And that's something that we've instilled in them, that we love them because of who they are, because they are Gordons, because they are ours. I don't love them because they're a pretty little girl, because that changes. They grow up, they become teenagers, they're pimply, and they don't feel so pretty, but they need to know that they're loved not because they're pretty, but because they are ours. And we need to speak about their futures, what it's going to look like, and that they're going to be amazing, that they're going to be great, and that we'll always be there. Dad, I'll always be your dad, and you'll always be my girl. And we speak into their future, and we give them security with our words. The third thing was affirmation. "With you I am well pleased," the Father said to Jesus. And on this thing of affirmation, there was a movie out a while ago called 8 Seconds. It's a true story about a bull riding champion. And bull riding is these wiry young men, 70, 80 kgs, taking on 1,000 kgs of pure muscle and trying to hang on for 8 seconds. And this young man his father was a professional bull rider, and so this young man followed in his father's footsteps, and he rose through the ranks and got very good and turned pro himself. He won the club championships and went to his dad all proud with his trophy, and his dad would sort of acknowledge it and say, "You can do better." And so he became the state champion. And the same thing when he went to his dad proud, showing him his trophy and what he had done, he would just say, "You can do better." And so this boy just couldn't get the affirmation that he was so desperate for from his father. And so he took it upon himself to go through regional champs, and he eventually became the world champion bull rider. And he got this gold buckle for his belt, and he went to his dad, no higher accolade. And he said to his dad, "Look at it, world champ." And his father said, "Well, let's see how long you can hold on to it for." And that was the final straw that crushed that young man. He just knew that no matter what he did, he couldn't please his father. And so that led him into a downward spiral of drugs, divorce, and eventually death. And so with our words, we need to affirm our kids. We need to celebrate with them. I mean, we need to share their victories. My wife is so good at going to all the sports games, and I often can't get there. I try as best I can, but she is always there, and I sometimes arrive late and leave early, but always that they know that I was there, get their attention. I'm one of the loud dads on the side of the field when I am there. But you go to their plays and to their recitals, and when your kids want to show you something, even, I get home and my daughter's made the latest batch of Play-Doh, or what is the goo that she's a little scientist, and they're so excited about what they've done, and it's so easy just to ignore that, but take a bit of time, show some interest, and celebrate. Gee, that's the best goop that I've seen you make. Well done, that's amazing. And the smile on their face, and they're just so excited that you've acknowledged what they've done. You know, your kids always want to impress you, and you need to find ways to let them do that, and then give them the affirmation with your words that they need. So as we come into land, having heard all of this, maybe you sitting there and you may be a little bit discouraged and thinking, I haven't used such great language, or haven't really encouraged my kids as much as possibly I could have. Don't be discouraged. It's never too late. We can always ask our kids to forgive us, and it's something that I try and do quickly. Even if I've said something harshly, I've reacted and I haven't thought, I'll always go to my kids and say, "I'm sorry for the way that I spoke to you earlier. I apologize for that. I needn't have been so harsh." And kids are so gracious and forgiving. And even if your kids are older, you can always still go back to them and begin to mend things. There's a redemptive thing in God's word. And if we take it to him in prayer, he is gracious and helps us to restore and see forgiveness and see healing restored back into relationships. And so if there's one thing that you can take away from tonight, I think it's to know this, that your words have power. And once spoken, they set into motion either life or death. And Proverbs 16 verse 24 says, "Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones." And so, like carefully selected precious stones, let's choose words that our children can treasure for the rest of their lives. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hope this has been helpful to you all.
Good night.